Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Observation Conversations. My name is Reid.
And I'm Jonathan.
And if you're hearing this recording, then that means we're not here this week. But we're time traveling a little bit because we are. It's a little weird. It's a little confusing. And to connect those topics, we're talking about Westworld.
As I was about to say, I mean, what a perfect segue into what we're talking about, because this is definitely a show that also falls into the category of weird and confusing.
Yeah.
So this is a paradox. As you said, we are both here and also elsewhere. This is a pre-recorded episode.
As all episodes are.
It's true. I mean, we don't do these live yet. We like to use these opportunities when we haven't gotten anything new this week. Talk about some old stuff, some stuff that we like, stuff that intrigues us from the past. Yes, this week we're talking about Westworld, an HBO show which in many ways defies classification. It is a sci-fi dystopia thriller action show, I suppose.
By like season 3, it definitively is all those things. But like the first 2, it's like, yes, sci-fi, but it also takes place in what seems like modern day, but it's set in the Wild West. So you're right, It kind of defies all genre classifications.
There's layers upon layers upon layers. So much so that it's even kind of difficult to figure out where to start with this show. You know, we were talking about this earlier. You know, we could try to sit here and recap 3 seasons of the plot, but we simply don't have 4 hours to try to untangle all that. So we're just going to kind of take this in a more freeform direction, talk about characters that we like, themes that we think are interesting, and just our general feelings about Westworld. So, Rita, I know this was originally
on this journey. Maybe we'll finally reach the center of the maze.
There you go. With any luck. So originally this was your suggestion to talk about Westworld. Frankly, I don't think we knew that each other were independently fans of this show. We've never talked about it before.
I feel like it had been mentioned in passing. Like, oh, what are you watching? Oh, I'm watching Westworld. Because I believe you were the first to watch it. Because you like some of the HBO shows, but you never really got into Game of Thrones. But I think you did get into Westworld.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
But I was pretty late to the Westworld party. I wasn't of the belief that it would be the show that replaces Game of Thrones. I still don't think it was.
Yeah.
But like my dad watched the first few episodes and he was like, "This is really good. You would really like this because it deals with a lot of topics you would really enjoy." And I was like, "All right, I'll give it a try." And I watched it and I was like, "This is really cool and it's just fun to think about." But yeah, I mean, I've just been a really big fan of the show. Unfortunately, we've had to wait so long for this season 4, which will happen, and it is renewed. I just don't know if they started production, but yeah, I mean, when did you watch it? Because I assume it's been longer since you've seen any.
Yeah, well, so really my journey with Westworld is I watched each season as it came out. So in late 2016, I followed along with season 1 as that was coming out. In mid 2018, when season 2 was coming out, I watched it then. And then last year in 2020, when season 3 came out, I watched it then as well. I haven't gone back to rewatch any of it, but I watched each season as it came out. So for me, season 1 is 5 years in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
I remember aspects and elements of it, but it hasn't been a recent viewing for me on that.
So I mean, like you said, it was 5 years ago, but can you remember anything of what your like initial reactions were and kind of how you felt about the show, seeing it for the first time?
Definitely. Yeah. No, as you mentioned, I mean, this isn't news to anybody, but there's a lot of good programming on HBO. There's a lot of good shows. So I kind of I follow along with some of the bigger projects that come out on that network.
Hmm.
And I remember when they were promoting Westworld, I thought, okay, this looks really interesting. It's going to be this sci-fi modern take on this weird kind of sci-fi western movie from the 70s that had kind of faded into obscurity. Like nobody
Yeah,
really
I've
remembers the original Westworld
I've heard
movie.
there was a movie. I have
Yeah.
not seen it. I don't know what it was look like. I don't know anyone who has seen it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, quite honestly, that was one of the things that intrigued me most about it, that they were putting such creative heft and such a big budget behind something that really is not a well-known property at all. Like,
Yeah.
the Westworld movie was obscure at best. It came out in the 70s. It didn't make
Was
a
it
big
was
splash when
it
it came out.
based on a book even, or was it like an original
Oh,
screenplay?
I think it was an original screenplay, but I don't know. I could be wrong about that. Um, so I was really intrigued when it was coming out, and because it was such a big project, it really did seem to me like they were setting it up as kind of like a successor to a Game of Thrones in terms of scale and must-see TV.
Yeah.
You know, of course, as you said, I don't think ultimately it filled that niche. I don't think it's nearly as all-encompassing as Game of Thrones was. I was someone who never watched Game of Thrones, but even I ended up watching most of the last season of the show just because it was in the zeitgeist and it was everywhere, and I kind of wanted to see what everyone was talking about. I don't think Westworld quite fills that same niche, but it is a very big show, and it definitely gets a lot of eyeballs. And so, watching through the first season, I remember being really impressed by the ambition of it.
Mm.
And the writing was really good, and the concept was really good, and the acting was great. There were definitely times where, it's Westworld. So there are definitely times where, you're just kind of along for the ride. You can't exactly track exactly what everyone's motivation is and what the exact plotting is at this particular moment. But it looks so beautiful and it's so well put together. You just kind of go along with it.
Yeah, I remembered
And
like every single episode I'd be like explaining to my parents what's going on, even though it
yeah,
was their second viewing and my first.
yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, it even though I couldn't always exactly tell you why, it really did hold my interest from week to week across all 10 episodes of the first season. And definitely with the conclusion of season one, I was very eager to see what came next. So that was my first feeling about it was this is really interesting and really cool and really weird.
Yeah.
But it's so much fun to talk about and think about. And for me, it kind of breaks down. This is how I classify the three kinds of people that watch Westworld, because I really do think there's three distinct camps of people that watch the show. On the one hand, you have the people that just love Westworld. They love the show, they love the characters, they love the writing, they love everything about it. They think it's great television. On the next camp of people is the people who like Westworld. They find it interesting and intriguing and kind of weird. It's kind of a curiosity, but they like it more or less.
Hmm.
And they'll watch it if it's on. And then in the third camp of people, you have the people who it's a I'll say this, it's a guilty pleasure. They don't like Westworld, but they love to talk about Westworld. And they love to
Mm.
complain about how overwritten and convoluted Westworld is. And
Yeah.
in order to talk about those things, you still have to watch it. So they watch it begrudgingly just to be able to complain about it.
Wait, so
And
so which are you then?
and that's kind of the thing is I'm a little bit of all three, honestly.
Yeah.
There are elements of the show that I love. There are many times where I just like it, but am more or less along for the ride. And then there are many times, especially after a long time has passed, after a new season has come out, where it's just picking it apart and complaining about the stuff the stuff that was either an odd choice or was overcomplicated or convoluted or overwritten, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've done my fair share of complaining about the show as well. So I'm a little bit of all three. But what about you? Where would you classify yourself?
I definitely would. I'd say the same. Maybe less so too, because I've always been, watching the show with like super hyped, and I was like, I want to see the next episode so bad. Um, but yeah, there's definitely that part of me that's like super not skeptical, but like nitpicky. Like I remember, within the first two episodes, some of the first questions I was asking is like, so they have guns in this world.
Yeah.
These guns shoot and kill the robots,
Yeah.
and the robots die.
Hmm.
And the robots have guns, but they can't, and they can shoot and kill each other, but they can't actually shoot the humans,
Yeah.
because that would be a huge lawsuit.
Hmm.
What happens if a human mistakenly shoots another human? Does the gun also just not fire? Like, what
I,
happens? And then they also have like knives and
mhm.
dynamite. And, like, these people can attack each other thinking they're robots. There's like,
Yeah.
and that was just like one of the first things. It wasn't even like about the show specifically, but just about the nuances of the park in this fictional world, which was like,
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
this make any sense?
Yeah, I don't know about knives. That's a good question about knives and other weapons. But I think when it comes to guns, the technology in Westworld is, they may have explained this in the show. I'm not sure. But I imagine the technology in Westworld is such that it's like a smart gun. It knows to fire if it's either pointed at nothing or pointed at a host, but it won't fire if it's aimed towards another human.
Mm.
So that's my guess. Because as we've seen, these are not like play guns. They're not like Nerf guns. Like these are real guns. When you shoot them, they do real damage to real things.
Yeah.
And if you were to shoot them at a human, it would do what a normal gun does to a human. So I think that's the thing. So I think that it's like a smart gun where it won't fire if it's pointed at another human, but it will fire at anything else.
Yeah. It was like one of those things. There's so many questions.
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, I just thought, maybe we could go through and maybe just talk about who some of our favorite characters and character arcs are. And that might lead us into greater discussions about what Westworld means ultimately, to the
Yeah.
extent anyone can parse that out.
Oof.
I there are many times where, quite frankly, I'm not sure even Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, the showrunners, know exactly what Westworld means. But every episode, they convince you that they have something to say. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So, I have a few ideas. Do you have any characters that really stand out to you, or character arcs,
Um,
I should say, that stand out to you?
well, on characters, I will say it's been so long that I don't really remember the names of a lot of the characters,
Hmm.
but I do remember my favorite character always being Elsie.
Mm.
I thought she was so great and so fun. She was kind of playing this detective role
Hmm.
in the first season, and then they like pretend killed her off. But
Right.
then in the second season, they legitimately killed her off, and I was like genuinely upset because I thought she was so fun. Um, but character arcs, I mean, that one's. Why don't you go first? Because
Okay.
you clearly have something to say.
Well, so I was thinking yesterday, who would I say is my favorite character in Westworld? And honestly, there's a lot of contenders. There was a lot of characters that I think are really interesting, and I think we'll talk about a number of them. But if I had to pick a favorite, for me, I think it has to be the Man in Black, because the Man in Black, he is, for me, he's almost the closest thing we have to an audience conduit in the show. The
Mm,
Man in Black, he is so over the speeches and the philosophy, and he doesn't care about any of that. He doesn't care about oh dear, what was the character's name? It was Ford. Yeah, Dr. Ford's
yeah.
puzzles. He doesn't care about any of that. He just wants to do two things. He wants to escape his normal life by living in Westworld and doing cool desperado stuff, and just generally being a badass. And number two, he wants to just definitively get to the bottom of the mystery. He wants to figure it out. Ford has created this whole big maze, this elaborate puzzle box that is his story within Westworld, and he is essentially going around doing his cool desperado stuff, solving this puzzle, which is what we as the audience are trying to do as well.
Yeah, I think that definitely plays in, but I mean, if I recall correctly, the maze wasn't made for him, right?
No, it wasn't.
It was made for Angela. Who was the main robot girl?
Oh, you're talking about Dolores.
Dolores, yes. Yeah, the maze was made for Dolores.
Yeah.
And I think, if you're kind of following that metaphor of like, the man in black, who I want to say was named Will, but I might just be making that up.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, but William. Yeah, William. If William was kind of the straight man, like meant to be the audience, and he's like trying to get to the center of this mystery, he ends up learning that this maze is not for him. It's for the robots, which then makes it like, well, is this show for us? Or is it not? And it starts, and I think that's when it starts to fall victim of like all these random twists that sometimes happen for no discernible reason.
Yeah, but I kind of like that though. I like that the maze, as you're right, the maze isn't for him, but he tries to solve it anyway because ultimately he's invested so much of his life in Westworld. I mean, as we learn in season 2, he's practically the reason why Westworld exists because he's the one that got Delos to invest in it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
That he just wants to get to the bottom of it, and that's kind of the entirety of what he's doing throughout season 1 and season 2. In season 1, we kind of cut back and forth between William and then the Man in Black, and throughout season 1 they lead us to believe they're different people. Then at the end we learn that they're the same person at just different time periods. And then in season 2 it's just the Man in Black, and I feel like because we wrapped up the maze in season 2, they really didn't know what to do with him in season 3. Like, he had some cool moments in season 3, but he
was also just kind of like the crazy old man off his rocker.
Exactly. They just didn't know, they didn't have enough to give him outside of the park as much as they did inside of the park after they kind of resolved that with the door. But yeah, no, I think Ed Harris does such a good job with the Man in Black. Several of my favorite scenes of Westworld are Man in Black scenes, like the one in episode 2. Or no, pardon me, season 2, episode 2, where we get that introduction to. Do you remember that scene in the cage where young William is first being introduced to the host? Like, this is when Westworld is still a concept.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's being introduced to what the hosts are capable of, and it's this repeating cycle of him coming in and visiting the host version of himself and interacting with it to as essentially a tech demo to see what these hosts are capable of. And it's this repeating cycle that goes on and on and on until William stops visiting, and then everything else happens and time passes, and we learn that this William host that was created as a tech demo is still in the cage all these years later, including after the park has fallen. And it's like this.
Well, I thought that wasn't William / the Man in Black in the cage, but like either his father or his father-in-law.
Oh, no, I think you're right. Yes, no, it's a James host. Yes, James Delos host. Yeah, no, not him. So pardon me. It's been 3 years, so the details are a little bit fuzzy. But you're right. It was a James host in the cage. And it's like a really cool, like, it's almost like a horror like scene, like when we revisit that location in the present timeline of Westworld after it's been, it's dilapidated and abandoned, and the host is still in there.
Yeah.
Almost like
crazy.
Yeah, almost like a Nosferatu monster, which was really great. Also, I will say, in season 3, the Man in Black has those incredible scenes where it's him in a therapy session with all the different versions of himself.
Oh
So
yeah,
like
those are
current
fun.
William, young William, Man in Black William. I mean, like those are just so fun and weird. Um, Also, his whole thing with, running into his daughter, who he thought was dead, and he can't figure out if she's a host or not. And if she's a host, he's going to
Oh
kill her. But if it's really
yeah,
his
that
daughter, he
that
can't kill
whole
her.
descent into madness arc
Yeah.
really got to me. That was like, it made me feel like really sad,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. No.
sad for him because I don't know if I don't know if you've had like grandparents with dementia or anything like that, but it
Uh,
almost felt like that where he was just really losing himself.
oh yeah. Yeah. And also it doesn't help the fact that he is literally not living full time. He does go outside of the park sometimes, but most of his time is spent in this park.
Yeah.
He's living in this fantasy western world whose creative director, a Ford, essentially finds joy in taunting him and leaving him little things and little riddles to solve. And so you couldn't put it past him that Ford or someone else may have created a host version of his daughter just as a final insult.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think that if I had to say, I think that's probably my favorite character in the show. Or my favorite character to follow is the Man in Black from season 1, where you have young William falling in love with Dolores, and then the Man in Black in the present day, and finding out that they're the same person. To all the stuff in season 2 with him going around, figuring out the riddle, figuring out the puzzle of it all. And even in season 3, he didn't have, in my opinion, enough to do, but he still had some fun scenes like the self therapy scenes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my favorite character. But there's a lot of good options.
Well, do you remember the kind of post credits scene at the end of season 3?
I do, I do.
I think I'm hoping they'll have more for him to do in season 4. Where
Yeah,
he'll almost like take back that role of main character.
Yeah, I hope so, because both him and Bernard, I think were kind of sidelined in season 3. Those are the two
Yeah.
characters that I really felt they didn't quite know what to do with them. Well, yeah. Bernard was supposed to be Dolores's. The trailers let us believe that Bernard was going to be Dolores's main opposition in season 3, because by the end of season 2, we have this clear paradigm. You have Dolores, who is completely pro robot, believes that the robots should leave the parks and, be on an equal footing with humans, and they should
Yep.
just live among us like humans, essentially. Quite frankly, you could even argue that there's a certain host supremacist view in there, you
Yeah.
know. Whereas you have Bernard, who is a lot more moderate, I suppose, and a lot more pro-human. He's not thrilled with the way that the humans abuse the robots and the hosts constantly, but at the same time, he's not Dolores, who just wants to kill everybody and have it just be hosts. So he was supposed to be kind of Dolores's. It was going to be like clash of the ideological titans in season 3, and ultimately Bernard was kind of, I think, toothless in season 3. But we can talk more about that if when we get when we get to him. But that's one of my favorite characters. Another one of my favorites was just looking at the list of the names here.
Mm.
Charlotte Hale, Tessa Thompson. I really like
Oh yeah.
the Charlotte character. When season 2 came out, we got her in season 2, and this is when Tessa Thompson was fresh off of Thor Ragnarok. So, I was really excited to see her in this other thing that I really like, coming off of a movie I really liked.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating and so much fun to me, the progressions that character goes through. When we first meet her, she's like you know the straight-laced corporate lady. She's not evil, but she's definitely not. She's up to
Good.
something. Yeah, she
Yeah.
she she she
Has her
doesn't
own
have.
agenda.
Exactly, she has her own agenda. and she's ruthless as well. And we go from that to Bernard creates a Charlotte host for Dolores. The Charlotte host kills the original Charlotte, assumes her job in her life. When Dolores opens the door and all the hosts go through, and Dolores, the original Dolores Prime, I guess we should say, dies, Dolores becomes Charlotte. Dolores' consciousness goes into the Charlotte host's body. The Charlotte host escapes, makes it to the surface, then makes a new body for Dolores, puts the Dolores consciousness back in the Dolores body, goes back to being Charlotte, the Dolores henchman, who then resumes the original Charlotte's life on the surface, and then resents Dolores for being the underling and killing original Charlotte's family, who she didn't even want to live with in the first place, but she grew to it. She kind of got attached to them, and then turns on Dolores.
When we say the show is confusing, it's fucking confusing.
It's crazy.
It's
crazy.
Everywhere.
Yeah, but I do love that journey though. It's like, there are so many transformations. But I mean, yeah, Tessa Thompson is great, obviously,
and range she has going from Ragnarok to this.
Yeah,
she can act. I really want to see more of her.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just a great character. I mean, going from the sinister corporate lady to henchman to just Dolores, because that was crazy in and of itself. Tessa Thompson has to act as Evan Rachel would, acting as Dolores.
Acting as Charlotte.
As Charlotte. Like, that's crazy. Like, you have to think, like, you have to think about all those different layers happening at the same time. So going from the henchman to being Dolores, to going back to the henchman, to then being her own, I guess,
Dolores.
To being a different kind of Dolores, essentially being her own Dolores in a certain sense, with her own agenda, to the point where now she's now a top level threat. I find that to be very fun. I have a lot of fun with her character.
Do you know what character I'll miss? I'll miss Ford.
Yes,
he was kind of always a little bit of a backseat. You also couldn't tell if he was like going to be a friendly mentor or a villain.
Yeah.
Which is those scenes where anyone threatens him, and then just every single host in the area all turn their eyes onto this one person. So creepy, so cool. I wish we could have had a scene where Ford is just marching in with an army of his own hosts under his control. Yeah. And if they had even kept them around to be, instead of setting up Bernard to be the main opposition of Dolores, having Ford be that, or since Bernard was also Arnold, who was Ford's partner, if he somehow got like Ford's power in quotes of controlling the hosts, and then he's raising a host army to defend the humans against Dolores and her host army. That would have been really cool.
Yeah, that would have been.
I'm a little sad that Ford got, because he got killed off.
That was the season 1 finale. That was the big shocking finale.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was season 1 or season 2, but season 2 opened on him already being dead. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I was actually just about to get to Ford, and actually, this is actually a good place to actually talk about Ford as well as Bernard, because the two of them really go hand in hand. So, as you said, I mean, look, Anthony Hopkins obviously is an incredible actor, one of the best, in modern times, and he just won an Oscar actually a few weeks ago. And so, I get that he's definitely an expensive guy to have on set for filming 10 episodes of this show, and also if you're going to kill him off, that was definitely the way to do it. It served a very good plot reason why he had to die at the end of season 1. But I do miss him. Like that was a really fascinating. That was without a doubt one of the shining points of season 1.
Do you think he was a good guy or a bad guy? Like, where do you think his motives lie?
I think he was really misguided. I don't think he was a villain, but I think he was really misguided. And yeah, quite frankly, you could tell that what Ford's problem was, he had spent far too much time hanging out with robots and far too little time hanging out with other humans in the decades he's been working on these hosts.
Yeah.
That, of course, he kind of, started to get some wacky ideas about things. And so I don't think he intended to be villainous, nor do I think he even ultimately was villainous. But I just think he was really, really misguided. He went from the Steve Jobs-esque, brilliant visionary who, created the host and created the concept for all of this to, someone who was old and bitter and, quoting Shakespeare constantly and, just was kind of detached from reality.
Another old man off his rocker. I mean,
there you go, exactly. Which is why I think Ford and the Man in Black had such a great dynamic. Anytime that they had an interaction, or the Man in Black was dealing with the ramifications of what Ford had done previously. Ultimately, what makes them so compelling as a pairing is because they're so similar. They kind of lost a little bit of touch with reality, spending so much time in Westworld.
They're both very obsessive.
Exactly.
In their own ways.
Exactly. And they've kind of replaced their human interactions with these hosts. And so yeah, I mean, so ultimately I understand why we couldn't have kept him around, but I mean, he was a really great character. I mean, there were so many times in season 1 where Ford, and this is something that we'll talk about. I mean, all the speechifying in Westworld is definitely one of the frustrating things about that show. Like, people complain about that, and I'm with them on that. That Westworld is definitely overwritten.
Yeah.
Sometimes to an almost comical degree, and we'll talk about that. But there were so many times when Ford would be giving a speech about, his philosophy or his plan or whatever it may have been in season 1, and I may not even have exactly been able to follow what he was getting at, but he just sounded so good saying it, and it was, you know, he was definitely a presence that I missed, coming out of season 1. But that leads us to Bernard, because, Bernard really is kind of the main link we have to Ford after season 1. He originally he's kind of Ford's, his number 2, I guess. In season 1, he's kind of, he kind of works under Ford essentially.
Yeah.
And then, after he realizes that he himself is not a human, but a host, and he's Arnold and all that, he becomes very disillusioned with what Ford was trying to do. And I think that's why Bernard was very much on the pro-Dolores side of things in season 2 as opposed to season 3.
Yeah.
But my favorite, or many of my favorite Bernard scenes from season 2 were the scenes where Ford essentially appeared as the best analogy I could was like a force ghost.
Yeah.
When Ford would appear to Bernard either to help him or taunt him. And
so do you think those appearances were kind of, do you think Ford literally programmed pieces of his consciousness into Bernard, or do you think that was entirely Bernard's artificial consciousness imagining Ford on his own? Because that was something that the show, I can't, well, I guess I can't remember if the show actually explored that or not, but
I think they said that was Bernard's artificial consciousness constructing those.
Yeah.
I think that's what they said. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure that's how they explained it. But yeah, it's Bernard is a very interesting character. Jeffrey Wright, I mean, the acting talent on the show is really phenomenal across the board. That's one thing that I have to say, is that, I mean, it is a very, very, very well acted show. And Bernard, he's kind of the focal point of season 2, because season 2 is so disjointed and there are so many time jumps, and we're over here and then we're over there. Bernard is kind of the only through line, because we wake up with him after Dolores' massacre at the end of season 1, and we kind of follow him as he pieces together what's happened in the time that he's essentially been, I guess, like in a robot coma, I suppose. While also we're with him with flashbacks to previous events.
Yeah.
And it's not his fault that they chose to structure season 2 in such a weird way, but to the extent that they did, I think that was, he was a good choice to focus on, especially after, season 1 was so much, the Dolores and Ford show, pretty much. And so I did like that. Yeah, I mean, Bernard really is the character. I think Bernard is the closest we have to like a moral
compass.
like a moral North Star of the show. Like, he's like the most basically good person. Like I feel like, not so much from a logical standpoint, but from an emotional standpoint, Bernard is the closest thing that the audience has to a character in the show. Like, he's spends most of his time conflicted and confused, and
do I like this show? Do I not?
Exactly. And just trying to figure things out and trying to prevent as much collateral damage as possible. He's the most just basically baseline good person on the show, I think. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. He doesn't want to kill anybody. He just wants to contain the damage as much as possible.
Yeah.
And also avoid taking a side for as long as he can. And that's kind of Bernard. And so, yeah, good character. Yeah, Ford and Bernard, great pairing. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about them?
Not about them. I did want to get your opinion on Maeve.
Okay, yeah. So I guess,
and I would like to put her as my top contender for most badass character in the show.
I don't think I would argue with you on that. Yeah. Let's get to our two heavy hitters here, our two headliners. So you have Evan Rachel Wood as Dolores and Tandy Newton as Maeve. Again, both phenomenal. This is one of the things that season 3 did really well, was putting those two as the primary opposition in the season.
Yeah.
That was really compelling, because in season 1 and season 2, the two of them were not enemies. In fact, they were friends.
They hardly even interacted.
Exactly. Yeah, they were like on two completely different tracks of the show, and they rarely interacted. But when they did, they were friendly. They're not friends, but their interests occasionally aligned. Like at the end of season 2, where they would work together because they both want X outcome to happen, even if it's for very different reasons. And so, I'll start with Dolores, if you don't mind, just because,
sure.
She is the main character of the show. And Dolores has a really interesting arc. I mean, they all have really interesting arcs. But Dolores is really interesting, seeing her evolve over the seasons. When we start out with Dolores, she is still just playing her character pretty much. She's the wide-eyed rancher's.
She's not self-aware.
Yeah, she's just going through her motions, going through her cycles over and over again. She's innocent, harmless, just doing what she does. We see her journey with young William, and the two of them kind of falling for each other, and how he keeps coming back to be with her again and again. And then as things go on, she starts. You could tell around halfway through season 1 onwards, she's not self-aware yet, but she starts to notice that things aren't right. She starts to piece together that something is off, and that kind of grows and grows and grows. She starts to question, as we see every time they reset the host. Do you ever question the nature of your reality, she starts to question the nature of her reality, which makes sense because as the original host, she's been around the longest. After a certain amount of time, you would start to have lingering memories of things. Even though they do reset them every time, you would start to notice things.
Yeah.
Especially when you've been around for as long as she has. And so by the end of season 1, Ford initiates the reverie and makes her and a bunch of other hosts sentient. And it was, again, a really, really cool way to end season 1 when you think, that triumphant moment with Ford you were describing earlier, that's kind of like what he was building towards at the end of season 1. He had all the shareholders of Delos there, gathered for this big gala to announce the next big phase of his Westworld project and the next big phase of his Westworld story. And Dolores just walks up behind him and literally execution style shoots him in the back of the head. That was like that took your breath away. Like, I was not expecting that. Like, I truly thought season 2 was going to be the next phase of Ford's story. Like, he had this whole grand plan that he was teasing throughout season 1 of what the next part of his story was going to be, which I thought was just going to be a new version of Westworld, essentially. But no, the next grand plan of his story was the chaos that erupted. He gave the host sentience. I guess he asked Dolores to execute him. She does that, and it's chaos. The hosts are free.
Here's the thing that gets confusing, because I don't think he specifically asked her to execute him. What he did was he had been working on this villain for a long time, which I don't remember the name of. But he basically put that villain's code and personality inside of Dolores, sitting next to Dolores' personality. So, even when she gains consciousness, which, is also debatable because you can't really prove that, is she acting as Dolores or as this villain? Especially
I think
when she executes Ford.
Yeah.
Because my understanding was that was the role that the villain was supposed to take.
Yeah. No,
this massacre against the town.
Yeah, and I think that my interpretation of it is, I think when Ford first does the reverie, I think it was just Dolores as the villain character, but as time goes on, it's kind of a fusion of both. Essentially, that is just Dolores acting on her own initiative. I think by the end of season 2, it's definitely Dolores acting on her own initiative, and then going into season 3, it is. So I think it was a transition from Dolores, the character, to Ford's villain, and then a fusion of the two, which led to true consciousness, I suppose, through artificial intelligence. And so then going into season 2, Dolores is the unofficial leader of the host, essentially. She's not like a ruler, but she's definitely the one who is calling the shots, more or less, and she takes it upon herself, or yeah, I won't even say calling the shots, because again, she's not like ruling the hosts. It's really kind of more of an anarchic society at that point. But she's the one that starts the movement, essentially, to open the door so that all the hosts can go through and live freely in the great beyond, or the valley beyond, or whatever they called it. And yeah, I mean, it was season 2, I think, was probably the weakest Dolores season, because it was her transitioning from, as we were just saying, being the villain to being her own person, and her journey to open the door, which was kind of similar to what the Man in Black was doing. As he was getting to the center of the puzzle, she was solving the door. So they were kind of doing the same thing. And also, so many speeches. Like, okay, so let's talk about this, okay? Because we can't avoid this in every season of the show, season 1, season 2, and season 3, but particularly in season 2. This kind of goes to how overwritten the show is. Dolores, I don't. It's almost like there's like some sort of contractual obligation that Dolores has to deliver at least one speech every episode. Like it's, like honestly, like there's so many dialogues on power and philosophy and what it means to be and the difference between the hosts and the humans and who deserves to, who deserves what, and conscience and all this other stuff. And it gets eye rolling past a certain point. Like it was the same when Dolores was still a host, and it's the same when Dolores was the villain, and it's the same when Dolores is free. It's like, she has so many just discourses on various things. Like I'll never forget in season 2 when, when I, she kills Teddy, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, she
Yeah,
does. Because
she's about
Teddy starts to not believe in the cause.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And she starts giving a speech. I mean, I don't know.
Do you think the writers were being a little condescending with all those speeches, like unintentionally? Like, do you think they just had their heads up their own butts, or
I
do you
think
think it
so.
was just like an honest? They think this was going to be really good.
Yeah, no. I think it was unintentional. I think that they were. Look, I don't want to ascribe motivations to Jonathan Nolan or Lisa Joy. But I know that they are a husband and wife duo, so they run the show together. And obviously, Jonathan Nolan is Christopher Nolan's brother. And so I would suspect that HBO wanted to get a Christopher Nolan type and, a type thriller, like a very a very intricate, well crafted, thriller type thing where, with big budget, crisp visuals and a puzzle
Yeah.
box style mystery. But obviously they can get Christopher Nolan because he's off doing blockbuster movies. But they can get Jonathan Nolan. And so I think that was essentially the brief that they got. And I think that that was the two of them, doing their own thing, yes, but also trying to do the Christopher Nolan type thing, which is assemble an intricate Inception like puzzle box mystery, or like The Prestige. I think is an even better example. Do a show that's kind of structured and plotted like that, but it's Westworld. And so I think it really was unintentional how hoity-toity it comes off as.
Yeah.
I think that probably turned some people off when they tried the show. But again, that's what makes it fun to complain about afterwards because we all most people that watch the show have those same complaints. I
Yeah.
don't think they intended it to be that, and I think they did tone it down a little bit after season 2 because season 1 was complicated, but it was also like you could follow the general main action of it. Season 2 was structured really weirdly. Like there
Yeah.
were
That was
sections in the present, sections in the
so
future,
that
sections in
was
the
that
past.
was what I was gonna ask is like with these kind of time jumps, do you think that benefited or hindered the show? And or does it depend on the season? Because season 1, it was confusing because you were following the Man in Black and then you're also following William. But then
Yeah,
I feel like it left that twist of them being the same person a lot more effective.
yeah.
But then season 2 was just kind of all over the place. And
Yeah.
I don't know, what were your thoughts on kind of the use of those time jumps?
I I think it definitely I think it both was an asset and a hindrance. I think it was a hindrance because that turned off a lot of people who were more casual, who just wanted to try out, oh, this cool sci-fi show on HBO, a shot. I know people personally. I talked to members of my family who have tried watching the show, and they said, oh, well, we were interested to try, but we just couldn't get into it because couldn't follow it.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a hindrance in that way, but also I think it was an asset because for those people that were into it and were just excited for season 2 no matter what after season 1, I think it made it a lot more interesting to try to piece together and think about and talk about, which is why Westworld is such a talked about show.
Mm.
It's not necessarily one of the it is a big show on TV, but it's not one of the biggest shows on TV. But it's so talked about that because everyone who does watch it has an opinion on that stuff. And I think that in season 2 they really dialed it up to 11 in terms of structuring it in weird ways. And Christopher Nolan has this thing. He has the storytelling mechanism where I to the extent that I don't really understand it fully myself, but he has this flow chart where he has this thing where you have the beginning of the movie up here, you have the ending of the movie down here, and it's supposed to curve out, down, and around. And so you tell the story in a non-linear way, kind of like in The Prestige or Inception is another good example. So instead of just moving straight
Memento.
from beginning to end, or Memento, exactly. Instead of going straight from the beginning to the ending, you have the beginning and the ending at the same point here, and then you go out, and then come back around. And so you're going back and forth between the beginning and ending until you can see. And so
until you
when
have
you
all
do,
the pieces.
yeah, and so you have the full context for the ending you've already seen by the end of the movie. You've already seen the ending, but now you have the context for why the ending happened. And I think they were trying to do the same kind of thing with season 2, where we have the beginning, which is immediately after Dolores's rampage, or the massacre, and you have the ending. Well, we don't see the full ending, but we get hints about where things are going because Bernard's jumping back and forth in time, and we are going back and forth throughout the season to get the full context for how we get to the ending. By the end.
Wait, wasn't that another piece of the story that was like the time jumps weren't just like an editing thing, but an actual like symptom of Bernard's messed up consciousness?
Yeah, because
That just
his
came back to
memories
me.
got all screwed up. Yeah.
Because like as a concept, that's really interesting, but it also just makes the storytelling so difficult, especially when you're jumping to things that are not in his perspective.
Yeah.
But I can't. Well, I don't know if those were also time jumped or not. It's weird. I think I don't know. Do you think there's a way they could have done it better? Do you have an idea of how you would do it, or
I
because
think
it's so much to handle at once.
Yeah, I think they could have done the circular structure well if they didn't, or if I think they could have done it better, because I still think they did it well. It was again overwritten and overcomplicated, but it was still entertaining to watch. But I think they could have done it even better if they limited the perspective to fewer people. The cast is so big, and everyone has their own plot line that we're going through this same circular structure for almost everybody. You have Charlotte, immediately post massacre, and then you have Charlotte later on in the timeline. You have Man in Black immediately post massacre, and then you have Man in Black later in the timeline, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. We check in with everybody and how they moved through that sequence of time. And I think if you had limited it to fewer focal points,
or at least only like one per episode.
Exactly. I think it could have been a little bit cleaner. Like for instance, like in season 2, like we there was an episode where like the Ghost Nation, people were, were the focal point. And like no offense to the Ghost Nation, like,
they're not
cool,
but we didn't need that episode.
Yeah, but
up. Like that didn't really help the story in any way.
Yeah, like we really could have done
way,
without that. Yeah, we could have done without that, especially like towards the end of the season. Like let's focus on the main action and the main characters.
Yeah.
So so I think that if they just limited it a little bit more, they could have done it a bit better. But yeah, going back to Dolores, in season 2, she succeeds in opening the door. The vast majority of the host population goes in, their consciousness are uploaded to it was either the Valley Beyond or the Great Beyond or something else. A lot of them die essentially. Like a lot of them, their host bodies fall off a cliff, and
yeah,
are uploaded.
They don't die per se, but their consciousness and programming is removed from the body and uploaded essentially to the cloud.
Yes, essentially, yeah. And then
Also, I just want to say the visuals of the gate, that
mm,
was so cool, switching between perspectives of like the hosts seeing like this giant portal and then everyone else just seeing hosts like running off a cliff.
yeah,
Like that
that
was
was
really cool to me.
yeah. I mean, just it goes back to Westworld is one of the most beautiful
Beautiful.
shows on
Yeah.
TV. I mean, it is so well shot and the effects are so well put together. And then Dolores as Charlotte escapes the park with a few other consciousnesses.
Yeah.
And then that gets us into season 3, where Dolores's plan in season 3 is not very well explained, chiefly because she doesn't really explain it.
Yeah.
She wants to create more hosts. Well, no. What she wants to do is bring down the Rehoboam and the corporate guy. What was his name? Um, uh, pardon me.
But that was the he's like the French guy and it was
Yeah,
the actor who played the like art thief in Ocean's 12, I believe.
that's the guy. Um, Angaran Serac.
Yeah, Serac.
Yeah, and she wants to bring down Rehoboam.
So well, first of all, she gets there and then she build like a new Bernard because Bernard had died.
Yeah. Oh
Like
no,
that
I
was one
remember.
of the consciousnesses that she took of
Yeah. So yeah,
pearls.
I remember why. It was because Rehoboam was an artificial intelligence that was essentially dictating the lives of everyone because
Yeah.
it's like it's universal. It's like as universal as smartphones are today.
It was
And
essentially if fate was an AI, then
exactly,
it tells you what
exactly.
happens. Yeah.
And she wanted, just like she liberated the host, she wanted to liberate mankind from this Rehoboam program by destroying it.
Why though? Like she wants to liberate the hosts and destroy humans, but then she liberates the humans in the
Exactly.
hopes that they destroy themselves, I think.
Yeah, that's
And
what
then
does.
she revives Bernard because she, I guess, had this epiphany or knew that he was supposed to stop her, which
Yeah.
why would she then revive him if he's gonna stop her?
At the end of season 2, I thought it was so funny. At the very end of season 2, the stinger at the end of the final episode, he explains to Bernard. Bernard wakes up and he's on the surface now, and he's as shocked as we are that
Yeah.
Dolores is back. And Dolores literally explains that she brought him back because, just as you said, the two of them are destined to try to stop one another. He's destined to try to stop her, and she's destined to try to stop him. They are like, they are they're like, again, it's like almost Shakespearean. There are these antagonists that are just, they are polar opposites. They cannot, or better example, like Batman and the Joker. Like
Yeah.
they can't, they need each other. They dedicate themselves to destroying one another, but they can never quite do it because at the end of the day, they really do need each other. And that's why she brought him back. As like
But
Bernard is
she,
the Batman to her Joker, which I thought was just hilarious.
yeah. But it's just weird because like she also doesn't really need him because he was never really in her way that much
Well,
up
then,
until
and
like
as
the
we said,
very end of season two. And
yeah,
like
and
he was also, so I don't know if it was like because of the way he treated her or like because she's fond of Arnold
mm,
and Bernard is Arnold.
yeah,
I don't know. It was the transition the end of you're right. Season 2 was definitely the weakest link.
Mm.
Which is weird because season 3 is almost like a different show.
Yeah, in fact,
It's
honestly,
just so different, but
I wouldn't even say that. I actually really liked season
oh,
2.
I love
I
season 3. I
I
think
mean,
season 3 was my favorite of
yeah,
all of them.
you, you said season 3 was your favorite?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, season 3 was my least favorite,
Oh,
actually.
really?
Yeah. For me, I actually think season 2 was my favorite, largely because, as I said, it was a guilty pleasure. Like, even the things I didn't like, I liked because I just found them fascinating, or the
Yeah.
choices I didn't agree with, I liked. I was engaged with the show because I was wondering what the hell are they going to do next week? Like I was so into it in season 2, more than season 1. So,
But I
you
want to
know,
get into this. Why don't you like season 3?
okay, yeah, so this is kind of where I'm going with this. So, um, yeah, as you were just saying, Dolores's motivations don't really make sense because she's definitely not pro-human, and yet she wants to free the humans from this AI, which is controlling them effectively behind the scenes. Um, and the reason why she wants to do this is never particularly well articulated. You could argue that she was playing the long game, and by destroying the AI, it would just, because so much that AI underpins so much of daily life, that it would create chaos, as we kind of saw after she did take it down. It was kind of like, chaotic, and that might lead the humans down the path of destroying themselves. But that was never particularly well articulated. Um, and so, to answer your question, why did I think season 3 was the weakest? And I do want to talk about Maeve as well, because
It's a
that's the
big part
other.
of season 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and really kind of the yin to Dolores's yang. Season 3 had a few problems. For one, my number one thing was I felt it was too short. Season 1 and season 2 were both 10 episodes. Season 3 was only 8 episodes. And I felt like the ending that we got in season 3 was really rushed. We needed some more time to get to, they really rushed through a lot of things, and had a lot of things happen off screen to get the season to end by the end of 8 episodes. And I think they just really needed more time.
Yeah.
So that was my biggest thing. Also, character motivations were not very well explained. And that was a deliberate choice because, like, Aaron Paul's character literally asked Dolores several times what the plan is and why they're doing these things, and she doesn't tell him. She chooses not to tell him, even though Aaron Paul is kind of integral to what she's trying to do, as we later learn. Also, there were main characters from previous seasons that didn't get a lot to do, as we were saying, with Bernard and the Man in Black and several others. It was still good. I still enjoyed it, but it was, for me, definitely the weakest of the three. And the end of season 3 definitely left me a lot less excited for what's next than season 1 and season 2 did. Like, I was hyped for season 2 after season 1. I was hyped for season 3 after season 2. After season 3, I'm interested to see what happens next, but I have concerns now.
Yeah.
So
That's fair.
yeah, so that's why it was the weakest for me. But of course, season 3 did have its shining points. So let's talk about a few of them. And that starts, I think, with Maeve. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean that whole I think just it's a lot of pseudoscience that somewhat doesn't make sense, but it's also kind of makes sense and it's just really cool. The idea of these AIs being trapped in a simulation,
Hmm.
that was really fascinating to me. And how did season 3 air before or after Rick and Morty?
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Rick and Morty started like in 2015. So,
Yeah, because they had this one scene where they're basically trying to overload the simulation so it freezes
mm,
so they could then escape, which
mhm.
was like straight out of Rick and Morty. But I thought that was really cool. And then the way Maeve like then is able to control the real world robot,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Truthfully,
Yeah. So can we talk about Maeve's arc a little bit, because Maeve is fascinating.
yeah,
Like,
Maeve is just she's so cool. I mean, right from her origin, I guess, where some of the hosts have been randomly gaining consciousness and self-awareness, and she does
mhm,
um while she's being reset, and
mhm.
she forces these two guys to basically make her super smart,
Yeah.
and then she's able from then on out to like outsmart everyone.
Yeah, and it's always so much fun when those two technicians pop up, because
Oh
we
yeah.
see them again in season two, and do we I think we yeah, they also
Yeah, we
show up
see
in
them in
season
season
three.
3 because they're inside the simulation.
Yeah, yeah, and
So
yeah, no,
she escapes
those
into the
two are great.
Westworld facility that is being simulated,
Yes.
and then finds the simulation that is being run in that facility because it's the same simulation she's in, I guess.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
So
Um,
yeah. Maeve is fascinating. So as you said, she essentially threatens these two technicians to make her super smart, and then they become her unwitting accomplices in trying to find her daughter. She's
yeah,
convinced that her host daughter is real, and so all throughout season one,
because she's
she's
having
trying.
memories from a previous storyline that is not
Exactly.
continued. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, all throughout season one, it's her trying to escape Westworld, escape Delos, and make it to the surface so she can find her daughter.
Well, she
Um,
almost does.
yeah, well,
She
yeah, she
almost
comes
gets
this
on the
close.
train and leaves, and then she decides to turn back.
Yeah, yeah, and then in season two, oh boy, there's so much in season two. So she decides to stay, and then Dolores' massacre happens, and she just becomes this like and this is pretty much the Maeve's characterization throughout the rest of the show. She just becomes like this wandering warrior badass that goes around, like, she is so single-minded. Like, unlike, like, Dolores is very ideological. Bernard is very ideological. Maeve is not ideological at all. She does
Her
not.
ideology is fuck shit up.
Exactly. Like, her only concern is what she wants to do. Essentially what she needs and what she wants, and she will go to any length and kill anybody that stands in the way of achieving that. And so she's essentially navigating this post-massacre world. And then later on, I mean, one of the standout episodes of the whole show, when she goes to Shogun World,
Oh,
and she
yes.
becomes
So cool.
not only does she become trained as a samurai, but as you said, she unlocks an ability where she can control not only other hosts, but any kind of any kind of advanced machine she can
Yeah.
control. Um,
Was that
that was
explained how she learned how to do that? Because that was like Ford's ability too.
yeah. I don't know. It's kind of presented almost like a superpower. I mean, we
Yeah.
never see it. We never see it. I don't think really explained, or that's not like ever. She's never programmed to do that. It just kind of happens. Um, but yeah, she goes to Shogun World, which is also no. It's not the first time we see a park other than Westworld,
It
because
was the
earlier
World War
on.
II park.
Oh no, that's season three. In
Oh, that's
season
season 3.
two, yeah, in season two, the first
Oh,
time we
right.
see the first time we see a park other than Westworld is the Raj. Remember, from that
Yes.
was like
Yeah.
early on.
That's William's daughter is in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was so, and that was a lot of, like, that was a thrill to see, because we that was teased at the very end of season one, that we saw some of the artifacts from the other parks, and we saw like the samurai armor and all the other stuff,
Yeah.
but we never saw like any stuff from colonial British India. So that was completely out of left field. But that was really cool to see that whole thing realized. But we don't actually spend much time in the Raj. But we do spend a whole episode in Shogun World.
Yeah.
And that was so much fun, just watching Maeve become a samurai and then get this ability to control any kind of advanced machine, and then like she like has she almost has like a Last Samurai style final showdown where it's her versus this overwhelming force, and she demolishes them essentially. Like
Yeah.
it was awesome. And yeah, so that was awesome. And then she's just a samurai for the rest of the show. And she's got a sword and everything, and it's awesome. And then, she comes back into Westworld. She's following the events of, everybody going through the door. She contemplates going through herself because her daughter is there. Or at least she thinks her daughter is there. And she thinks that she might be reunited with her daughter if she goes through. But she doesn't do that. And that's when, we kind of don't really know what happens with her until we see her again in episode 2 of season 3, where now he's in a Nazi-occupied World War II world, which we learn is not actually a world. I think it was like a Nazi-occupied Italy, I think it was. This was like during the invasion of Italy. So I guess if this were an actual theme park. Yeah. The architecture seemed kind of Italian, so I'm assuming this was probably during the Allied invasion of Italy in 1943. And as you said, at this point she's smart enough where even though she's been deliberately trapped in the simulation, she figures it out. She breaks out. She makes it to the surface, and then once she does that, her main thrust throughout season 3 is being the primary opposition for Dolores, which, look, her fights with Dolores were incredible.
Good.
Those were
This is why
incredible.
season 3 is my favorite season.
Yeah,
the world building is great. The action is great. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, I don't want to sell them short because those confrontations and those fights were incredible. Both the banter that the two of them have and then them actually fighting each other, because Maeve, she's got the samurai training, she's got the sword, she's got the ability to control other machines. And whereas Dolores is just kind of like the Terminator, like you could do almost anything and you can't stop or destroy her. And so you have the Terminator versus samurai, and like it's awesome. That part was great. What I didn't like as much was it didn't make, again, a lot of sense to what had come before. Like, Maeve is not ideological. Dolores is doing all this because she wants to further her vision of the world. Maeve just cares about Maeve. It doesn't make sense.
Maeve was essentially recruited by Serac to stop Dolores.
Yeah, but let's be honest.
I don't remember what he promised her, but it may have been, somehow getting her to her daughter.
Exactly. But I mean, because there was an element of coercion, because I think Serac threatened to trap her in the simulation forever if she didn't help
that.
Her.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think after a certain point, that threat goes away, or something happens where that's no longer the case. She just no longer has to worry about that.
I mean, he basically comes to respect her.
Well, but here's the thing, though, is that because Maeve only cares about Maeve, after the threat of being trapped in the simulation forever is taken away, why does she still care about what Dolores is doing? She doesn't care if the world is ruled by humans, the world is ruled by hosts. It doesn't really matter to her. She's just looking out for number one. But she continues to pursue her. So that didn't make a ton of sense to me. And especially when you consider the finale of season 3, where we've left everything. Dolores, she fights Dolores. Quite frankly, I did not get the sense at all that Maeve won that final fight. From what they showed us, it seemed like Dolores had the upper hand in that situation. But regardless, Dolores is defeated, and then on a dime, Maeve joins Dolores' side, betrays Serac, and helps her sacrifice herself to destroy Rehoboam, which kills her in the process, kills Dolores. So again, what is Maeve's motivation? She doesn't care about anyone but herself or what her interests are. She helps Serac at first because she has to, but then she doesn't have to anymore. But she still is pursuing Dolores, which would suggest it's personal. But immediately after fighting her, she decides, okay, you know what, Dolores, you make some pretty good points. I'm gonna stop fighting you and actually join your side and help you betray Serac. Um, and then Dolores dies, even though, again, I did not get the sense at all that Dolores lost that fight. It seemed to me Dolores had the upper hand the entire time. Like Maeve, you could say won the first fight, sure, but I think Dolores won the second fight. Um,
Yeah,
and so
I need a rewatch the entire season because
yeah,
I'd be very surprised if it wasn't like casually mentioned or even hinted at what kind of all of their motivations were. But you're
mm-hmm.
right, it's just not clear. And I think that's something the show has kind of always struggled with a little bit.
Yeah,
But it was definitely a lot more prevalent in season 3, especially being
yeah.
away from the
Because
from
they
the
were
plot.
rushing, and then that goes back to my main thing is they were rushing. I mean, especially with that finale, they rushed things so fast. I mean, we're talking about the death of the main character here. The main character is going to sacrifice themselves to destroy this thing, and they're
Well,
dead.
kind of
And
death because Charlotte Dolores is still around.
yeah, but I don't think Charlotte Dolores is still
She's
Charlotte Dolores.
not.
I
She's
think
no
Charlotte
longer
is just
Dolores
Charlotte.
Prime.
Yeah. I think Charlotte is her own thing now. You know, I think you still have elements of Dolores, but I think that her ideology is a little bit different from Dolores. I don't
Yeah.
think, whereas Dolores was purely hosts, Dolores was very much about killing humans and hosts being on top. I think Charlotte is a little more nuanced. She doesn't necessarily want to destroy humans. She even likes a few humans, but she's definitely, as we see at the very end, and this is I think what you were alluding to earlier, at the very very end of the finale of season 3, she's creating a lot more hosts, and to the point where maybe it's an army, maybe they are just going to live among us. um we don't know exactly what she wants to do. I don't think she wants to wipe out humans, but she she definitely values control.
Yeah.
Both original Charlotte and Dolores valued control very much. And I think she's going to use her legion of other hosts that she's now creating, either as extensions of herself or as a way to start, or start something. I don't know. It's hard to say, but she's planning something, and I don't think it's just killing humans. So but yeah, I didn't like the fact that Dolores died at the end of season 3. I don't think it was necessary for Dolores to die at the end of season 3. I felt
Yeah.
like we rushed to get to that point, and ultimately, there was a lot I wanted more context for, like Serac, for instance. First of all, great name, Angaran Serac. I mean, that's not a name that you hear every day. Like we see at one point a flashback of his childhood, and essentially there was some kind of nuclear accident or some kind of nuclear attack in his childhood. Do you remember this?
Yes.
There was a flashback to at some point in the 2020s, a nuclear bomb went off in Paris.
Yep.
That his family lived outside the city, so they weren't incinerated immediately, but he saw it and he was aware of it, and then that kind of was one of the main inflection points from our history to the world of Westworld, which I think takes place in the 2050s. So this is 30 years after that event. And I wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see more of him and his brother who went crazy, and his brother was almost kind of like Ford, but for this AI,
Yeah.
and now he's just using it, because he's a corporate bad guy. But I wanted to know more about him. I wanted to know more about the world. I wanted, like, we
It's
never.
weird though because I feel like season 3 did so much additional world building. which
Yeah.
was really cool because like the entire season takes place outside of the parks.
Yeah.
And yet there's a lot of information missing. So, and I think season 3 was also the only one that didn't really play with time jumps all
Yeah,
that much.
it was pretty
So,
linear.
so, maybe that, maybe those time jumps kind of do help the show. Um, Although it makes it more confusing, providing that backstory that is otherwise missing. Because you're right,
Yeah.
that would have been really cool to learn more about.
Yeah,
Uh,
I wanted to know more about this alternate history. You know, we've been in the parks exclusively for the last 2 seasons. Now we're outside. I thought we were going to learn a lot more about what has happened in this world in the last 30 plus years, really closer to 40 years between our present day and now, you know,
yeah,
because I mean, because we get hints, we get the hints of the nuclear attack in Paris. We see the cities, which are very kind of, you know, futuristic looking cities with mega tall high rises and all this stuff. Like, I wanted to know more about what's been happening in these 40 years and how things work. um you know, I want to know how governments have changed, and you know which countries don't exist anymore, and you know all this stuff. Like, I remember when season 3 was coming out, there was like there was a show website, you know, like a promotional website, and it had like a timeline of a few significant events. And this was also in the trailer for season 3. You remember where they had that timeline of significant inflection points and divergences,
hmm
you know, over the last however many decades. And I wanted to see those things. You know, I wanted more explanation. Like, as you said, there's a lot of great world building in season 3, but there's not a ton of context, or not as much as I would like anyway.
yeah.
And that was another kind of disappointing thing about it. We saw a lot of the world, but we don't. It doesn't get contextualized particularly. And so, yeah, Dolores is dead now. Maeve is still Maeve. She's out there. I guess she'll go back to doing her old thing of just looking out for number one. I'm not really clear where she goes after this. Bernard is, you know, again, Bernard was kind of toothless throughout season 3. Dolores brought him back to try to stop her, but he really couldn't do much. You
Yeah.
know, like, he's just kind of a guy in this world. You know, he's almost like a detective throughout season 3, just trying to piece together what Dolores is trying to do, but he can't do much to stop her. Um, and the Man in Black. Oh yeah, Charlotte is in. I think it was either Saudi Arabia or Abu Dhabi, Dubai, or one of those places, manufacturing tons of new hosts. She's now completely broken free from Dolores. She was already disillusioned with her. Now that she's dead, Dolores can't control her anymore, so she's doing her own thing. And the Man in Black. This is actually the last thing we see in season 3. There is one time jump, and that's at the very end, the post credit scene of season 3,
Oh
where
yeah.
we see the Man in Black is, as the showrunners described it, he's not only is he back in the parks, but this is the parks far in the future of the events of the rest of the show, which would suggest that the Man in Black is a host, and he's trapped down there, and you know, despite all this time having passed, he's still alive. um uh, and that's really fascinating because now you could see the whole Dallas facility. It's abandoned and dilapidated and falling apart, but he's in there and he's trapped in there far in the future. So
And then
um
there's also Bernard who I guess kind of opens the bridge again to the great
mm,
beyond.
yeah,
And then, we also don't know how much time has passed, but he's like covered in dust. It's like
yeah,
really many, many years. And then he wakes up, um,
exactly,
probably knowing something new. So
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, you know, I'm curious to see where it goes. Again, I don't feel Dolores needed to die. I'm gonna miss not having her around in season 4. I don't
unless they
think,
bring her back somehow, yeah.
yeah, which I mean, if they bring her back, that's just gonna feel contrived. I mean, honestly, like, I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm not saying this show isn't capable of doing contrived things, because it
Well, it's kind of
definitely
damned
is.
if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, like, I don't want it to be. I don't want to bring her back in some kind of cheap way. Um, And I don't think, I mean, look, it was cool to see Aaron Paul in this season. He was just kind of, he was also kind of an audience surrogate in that
Yeah, he was the new straight man. Yeah.
yeah, like he was just kind of along for the ride. He didn't really understand exactly why everything was happening. He was just trying to catch up. Um, but I don't think he's a new heavyweight for the show. Like, I don't really want to see much more of his character. Like, he can be around, like everybody else pops up from time to time, but like I'm not knocking down the door to see more of him.
Yeah.
What I do want to see is what the next big antagonists are going to be. Now that Dolores is gone.
I mean, what's your prediction for season
Well,
4?
that's what I'm trying to figure out. I
Because
I Yeah, I think that Bernard and the Man in Black are now off on their own track in the future. So I don't know how much impact they're going to have on the present timeline. I think on the one hand, you are going to see Charlotte because she does have those elements of Dolores, even though she is her own person with her own motivations now. And we're going to see more about what she's doing with all these hosts, what her plan is. And then on the other side, I don't know. I mean, because again, Maeve is a free agent. She's just doing her own thing. She's not, Serac isn't around to threaten her anymore. She's not under threat of being put back into the park or put back in a simulation. So she's just free to do whatever. So I don't think it's going to be her. I don't know. I mean, they
my
may have to come
my
up with a
guess
new person.
is that Charlotte is kind of making this army of hosts. We don't really know what for,
Yeah,
but William is kind of hell-bent on destroying them and just kind of
that's
burning
true.
Delos to the ground. And I think that's going to be the main kind of conflict for the series.
Yeah, that's very true. And that is very,
I can see Bernard and William working together. I can see Maeve trying to get Bernard's help to connect to the great beyond.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean that's very true, and I think that's even what my guess was immediately after season 3 was you're going to have a pro. Yeah, I should say Bernard isn't even the true opposite to Dolores. Really, it's the Man in Black, as you just said, because Bernard, he doesn't hate humans. He doesn't like how humans mistreat the robots, and he doesn't want Dolores to kill all the humans. But he just wants everybody to be on a level playing field. He wants the hosts that are sentient to have rights, but he doesn't think that they're better than anybody. And again, he doesn't want Dolores to kill all the humans.
Yeah.
But that's not Dolores' true opposite. As you just said, the Man in Black was Dolores' true opposite because he was the one who was bent on destroying Delos and getting rid of the hosts. He thought they were abominations, especially after they went crazy and killed everybody. He was the one who was Dolores' true ideological opposite because he actively wanted to stop the hosts and destroy them essentially. And so I think that what you just said is, I think, the most likely outcome. You're going to have a pro-humanity coalition of the Man in Black, who actively wants to destroy all the hosts, Bernard, who doesn't necessarily love humans, but he doesn't want them all to die. He just wants everybody to get along. Um, and then Maeve, who will help them just because Bernard can help her get to the great beyond, as you said. And then maybe you'll have Charlotte on the other side, and maybe some new character that they introduce. That's going to
Well,
be with
they
her.
they showed an evil Man in Black. Like
That's
William
true.
was fighting the Man in Black host.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true.
So
Oh, that was
that'll be
good.
fun
I would
to see
like.
more of
I would
that,
like.
or even an army of the Man in Black.
Yeah, that would be really cool to have. To have the evil Man in Black be Charlotte's henchman. That would be really fun. So, yeah, that would be my prediction. But yeah, Westworld, it's a great show. I do love it. It is frustrating sometimes. Um, and I think that there are a lot of the criticisms that I've heard about it, I think are very fair. But at the end of the day, I have so much fun with it.
Yeah.
It's too well crafted and too, the camera work is just it's too well acted, the camera work is too good, and the storylines are too interesting and fresh not to pay attention to. So I really do love it. It's a great show.
Yeah, it's really good filmmaking, and although the writing is both really good and really bad at times, conceptually it's just so engaging. I think that's the biggest thing going for the show is just the concepts that they're playing around with.
Well, absolutely. It's like you can't help but talk about it. It really is event television in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, again, maybe not to the extent of like a Game of Thrones, but like you are aware when Westworld is on. Like it's there's a lot of chatter around it because it's so fascinating. And so, yeah, great show, great show.
Would you recommend it?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, if anything, admittedly, we have kind of spoiled it for any of you who listen to this. But
yeah, if you listen to this and you haven't seen it, then that sucks for you. But
yeah, but I would say if anything that we've described it really intrigues you, definitely give it a watch because there's so much more that we haven't even touched on that is just interesting details and plot lines and subplots and minor characters to the show. If what we've said in our rough synopsis has intrigued you, I would absolutely recommend it. It is a great show. Yeah, I would just say this. Don't go in expecting a Western, because that's kind of how they marketed it going into season 1. It was going to be a mixture of sci-fi and Western. While, yes, Westworld is literally an Old West setting, it's not a Western. I mean, there are elements from that, but go in expecting a sci-fi thriller with dystopian elements and even some horror elements and thriller elements and all that stuff and action elements and all of that. If you go in with the right mindset and go in prepared to be confused because you won't be able to follow all of it, but you'll have fun.
Yeah, prepare to have your mind boggled. As if you're looking for a quick and fun way to lose brain cells. But no, I would. Again, I'm a huge fan of this show. I rate it very highly.
Oh, likewise.
As problematic as it may be, it's a very fun ride. So
it's very, very fun, very, very fun. So yeah, definitely recommend it. Give it a watch if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's about all the time we have for tonight. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. This has been Observation Conversations, and we wish you a good night.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.